Angelica wins her final match in the qualifiers after a loss to Rick. After the match, Rick and Rionette congratulate her on completing 40 matches in the qualifiers. Angelica confidently responds that she'll win the league too. Angelica is puzzled about how Rick plans to compete in 40 matches within 4 days. She reminds him that with only one match allowed per day at each venue, he'll need to travel across the country and fight at different locations to achieve this. Rick interrupts her mid-speech and rushes off, saying he has a match at Green Hill Arena at 10. Angelica is amazed by his speed and asks Rionette if they can make it there in time. Rionette grabs her and leaps across buildings, taking Angelica along to the arena. After Rick finishes his match, he finds Angelica looking ill outside the arena and quickly moves on to the next one. Angelica feels nearly exhausted from moving so fast, while Rionette continues to carry her from arena to arena as Rick competes. Once Rick finishes his matches, Rionette and Angelica finally sit down to eat. Angelica expresses relief that Rick isn't in her league and declares she'll win the competition. Rionette mentions that Master Brewston is also competing in the East League. Angelica then asks where Rick is, and Rionette replies that he went jogging to Tronia, which is about 600 kilometers away from their current location. Angelica, unsurprised by Rick's stamina after getting to know him, jokingly asks Rionette if she's worried about people starting rumors that she might be Rick's lover. Rionette replies that she's unbothered and likes Rick. It seems like Rick has rizzed Rionette without even trying. At that moment, a waiter approaches, calling them beautiful ladies, then suddenly bangs his head on the table, begging for their help as they are part-timers. Rick returns from his 600 kilometers jog and encounters a dragon-like man who introduces himself as Snape Resurrect, the chairman of the committee managing the West League. Rick is curious how Snape knows him, and Snape explains that Rick is the fastest person to complete 40 matches in the West League. Of course, he knows him. Just then, Snape's guard informs him that Angelica isn't there, and Rick asks if he knows her. Snape reveals that they are very close and that he's a humble merchant on good terms with the Diarmuid family. Rick, noticing Snape's strong handshake, asks if he was once a fighter. Snape enthusiastically shares that he had a brief fighting career, retiring 20 years ago after winning a small tournament at the age of 23. He fondly recalls the crowd cheering for him and how much he loved it. Later, Rick enters the tavern, and Melicia asks if he's okay since he just spoke with Snape from Dragonaut Company. She warns Rick to be cautious because there are rumors linking Snape to the underground world. Rick is surprised, especially since Snape had mentioned being close to Angelica's family. Melicia mentions that it's surprising how Dragonaut Company suddenly became a major sponsor for this year's tournament, securing a free spot in the competition. Just then, Rick overhears someone talking about the bunny girls this year, specifically mentioning that the dark elf bunny girl is out of this world. Meanwhile, Angelica is busy encouraging people to place bets on the tournament competitors. Rionette, dressed in a bunny girl outfit, says that she wouldn't be doing this job if it weren't for Angelica. Angelica explains that she couldn't say no after seeing the guy's bloody face. Suddenly, a drunk guy touches one of the bunny girls and then Angelica. He tries to grab her melons but is disappointed when he realizes she's flat as a board. Angelica swiftly beats him up just as Rick walks in. Rick, panicking, asks what the deal is with the bunny outfits. Blushing, Angelica explains that they asked her to do this job, so she agreed. Just then, Rionette steps up from behind, and Rick is left speechless after seeing her in the bunny outfit. Meanwhile, Kelvin and his trainer discuss Brewston, who passed the East League qualifiers in just 2 days, winning all his matches with a single blow. Kelvin is excited about this year's tournament since he's up against such strong opponents. Kelvin recalls when his master scouted him and brought him to Heractopia to fight and earn money, promising that he would face even stronger opponents there. Tempted by the challenge, Kelvin decided to join. Rick, Rionette, and Angelica then head to the tavern. Angelica is upset, but Rick tries to cheer her up by complimenting her, saying she looks cute, and mentioning that a guy named Snape visited yesterday. The next stage of the tournament begins the following day with the first match of Group A between Helen Thompson and Angelica Diarmuid. Angelica fights fiercely, pushing herself to the limit, but ultimately wins. Rick also wins all his matches using the 8 moves he learned over the vacation. Afterward, Angelica talks to Rick backstage, expressing her determination to not lose a single match if she wants to advance in the tournament. Rick warns her to be cautious of her next opponent, but Angelica is unconcerned and moves on. Angelica then faces Taylor Blitz, a bulky, black fighter who is seemingly immune to all her attacks and magic. He lands a single blow that knocks her down. Although Angelica gets healed by a nurse, she's deeply disappointed by her loss. Rick catches up to her as she leaves the room and tells her she is too hasty, pointing out that her opponent opponent had strong defenses, making it a tough matchup. He questions why she used techniques that drained all her stamina, but Angelica refuses to answer and walks away. Rick continues to follow her, persistently asking until Angelica finally snaps and calls him nosy. They then discuss Snape, and Angelica reveals her family's backstory. She explains that when her family was on the brink of losing everything, Snape, a merchant, helped them in exchange for her hand in marriage, making her his fiancée. She believes Snape did this for his benefit, aiming to gain noble status. Rick, in a panic, blurts out how she could like someone like Snape. Angelica retorts, asking if he even listened to anything she said or if he's just dense. She goes on to explain that she investigated and discovered Snape was sponsoring the tournament, and she joined in hopes of canceling the engagement. Just then, they hear a fight in the bar nearby and rush over to find Taylor Blitz defending a woman from a drunk man. Taylor punches the man, but this only angers a red dragon guy who grabs Taylor by the neck and slams him to the ground. Angelica is shocked to see the dragon guy overpower Taylor with just one blow. The red dragon guy then approaches the woman, rips her dress, and threatens to have his way with her. Angelica steps in to stop him, and as he moves to punch her, Rick easily catches his hand. At that moment, Snape enters the bar and orders his brother, Geet, the red dragon guy, to stop. Snape tells the bar waiter that he will pay for the damages. Rick asks Snape about Geet, and Snape explains that Geet is his younger brother who occasionally loses control and acts out, with no one strong enough to stop him. After Snape leaves, Rick asks Angelica what Snape and the tournament have to do with her engagement. She reveals that Snape is going to invest a lot of money in their engagement and plans to make it through the tournament by fixing matches with his fighter, Geet, to make money. Angelica admits she joined the tournament to defeat Geet but doubts she can win against him. Rick offers to help her train, which surprises her greatly. Rick decides to train Angelica so she's ready for her upcoming battles. He uses the same rigorous methods Brewston used on him. He pushes her through a 30-kilometer run at a super fast pace, warning her to use strengthening magic or else she might die. Angelica is weighed down with heavy weights on her feet and is very anxious. Rick explains that this would help her body adapt to high-speed movement. As the training intensifies, Angelica finally calls him Rick instead of old man for the first time. Rick gets surprised a bit and then reminds her that they still have 6 more hours of running to go. Eventually, Angelica collapses, saying that she can see her deceased parents waving her into the afterlife. She even gets surprised that her legs are still attached. She then listens as Rick shares how he died 3 times on his first day of training under Renette. After a brief rest, Rick tells Angelica they'll resume training in an hour, emphasizing that it's only noon, so they have the entire day ahead. As Angelica sips tea, pondering how she must endure this to grow stronger, Rick joins her. He recalls his own experience of dying during training and Brewston telling him that he could revive Rick 2,000 more times if needed. Rick advises Angelica to create an imaginary mental scale in her head. As Brewston once taught him, she should place failure on one side and training on the other. Rick explains that he chose to endure the hard training because he didn't want to be a loser for the rest of his life. Angelica reflects on her goals, determined to rise above her noble family's shortcomings, become the best knight, and break free from her engagement. She resolves to train harder than ever. The next day, she faces a formidable opponent, Silva Haglin, who has 7 wins and only 1 loss just like Angelica. Angelica is fueled by her intense training. She enters the fight in a fierce, almost wild state, and swiftly defeats Silva, completely ignoring her surroundings. The audience, shocked by how their once graceful Angelica has turned into a monster, watches in awe. After the fight, Angelica snaps back to reality, overwhelmed by the attention. Rick and Renette reassure her, telling her it's okay and reminding her that she won the fight. Meanwhile, Mizet and Asaulted arrive, reporting that they couldn't find the orb in the ministry, suspecting it was just a hoax. Mizet the horny elf tries to hit on Milicia, a waitress at the tavern, but she avoids his horny ass. The group then informs Asaulted about the tournament, and she expresses her desire to join. Rick, however, cautions her, joking that she might destroy the entire venue if she participated. At that moment, Brewston enters, causing Milicia to blush because she kinda has a crush on him. The conversation then shifts to Angelica's training, and everyone encourages her, emphasizing that hard work and dedication will always pay off, urging her to continue striving for greatness. The next day marks the start of the 113th King Fist tournament. As the matches are announced, Angelica notices something suspicious. She points out that Geese, the red dragon, has been strategically placed in the bracket so that he won't face tough opponents like Brewston or Kelvin until the final. Angelica suspects that the matches have been rigged to make the audience believe Geese is much stronger than he actually is. Later, Rick and Brewston are walking when Kelvin approaches them from behind, telling them he'll see them in the semifinals. Brewston confidently replies realize that they're definitely going to win the championship belt. Kelvin is excited to face them and gets a flashback about how he came to this land to fight strong opponents. He recalls his first fight against Garen, a formidable fighter who initially defeated him. However, after intense training, Kelvin eventually beat Garen and became the champion 6 years ago. The first match kicks off between a fighter named Herman and the notorious Red Dragon, Geese. Herman lands several hits on Geese, but Geese remains unfazed. With a single, accidental strike, Geese knocks Herman out, winning the match with ease. As the tournament progresses, everyone faces their respective opponents. During Kelvin's fight, Brewston watches and praises Kelvin's foresight, admiring his ability to predict his opponent's next move. He even notes how Kelvin takes hits intentionally to entertain the audience. Mr. Snape then joins Rick and the others to watch the matches. Before Angelica's match, she encounters Geese and confidently tells him that she will defeat him. Geese responds that he won't hurt her too much since she's destined to be engaged to his elder brother. The match between Angelica and Geese finally begins. At first, Angelica struggles to land any significant hits on Geese and seems unable to inflict damage. However, she soon uses her blink step technique, slashing Geese at incredible speed and managing to wound him slightly. From a distance, Rick watches with pride as Angelica holds her own against the powerful Red Dragon.